you explained, he's responsible for every single one of them. These are all his ideas.
All Jeremy's rankings.
This is how he feels about every single player in the league, and he's with us to defend himself now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline.
I didn't say that, Jeremy.
Jeremy Fowler of ESPN is with us. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, in all honesty, Brady was going out of his way to say, no, this is Jeremy talking to other people and sort of collecting answers and coming up with a collective top 10 based on their answers, not your perception of who should be where. But I'm guessing that doesn't stop football fans from coming after you when you disrespect their players, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Most media members understand the exercise, but a lot of fans don't, unless it's favorable to their team and they like to highlight ooh, look what the execs and the scouts said. But if it's one they don't like, then they blame me.
Jeremy, I'm going to guess.
Fine.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that this is not the first radio interview you've done over the last couple of weeks. Is that a fair guess?
Yeah, Brady, pretty fair. But mostly the last couple of days since the quarterback rankings came out. That's when it sort of ratcheted up a notch. That's always fun. So we did receivers today. So those are two of the sexier positions. So.
Yeah,
it's been good. It's a nice little talking point before the season when it's a kind of a dull time.
Absolutely, yeah. And before we get into specific questions about the Seahawks who did or did not make the list and the positional rankings themselves, I'm just curious kind of about the process that you go through in doing this and what is maybe the most interesting or eye-opening part of this whole polling, voting process to you is this is something that you've done for, 4 or 5 straight years now, is that right?
Yeah, I think it's the 6th year, I'm going to say. No, 5th year. Yeah, 2020 was the first. So, yeah, it's always pretty revealing. It's interesting the biases some people have, or maybe they love the guy out of the draft who underachieved and then started to play well so they can validate their bias. Or if they just didn't like a guy and they had to rank him in the top 10 before, but he has a bad year, they can take him out. But I think most of them just go by, guys' traits and, how sort of scheme flexible is he. Can you just put him in any situation and he's going to thrive, and not only thrive, but help carry your team? So that's usually what it comes down to. I would say scouts especially look at that more than like the average fan that might go off of production or maybe what they see on a Sunday.
Yeah, and Brady was sort of walking me through that because initially, like the quarterback list, I was telling him this couldn't be based on just who these guys were last year coming into this season. Otherwise, Aaron Rodgers wouldn't be number 8. He only had 4 snaps. So I'm going, okay, that doesn't make sense to me when I'm looking at it. The other one that stuck out to me, which again is being here as a Seahawks fan, is weird for me to defend a 49er, is Brock Purdy didn't make the top 10, yet he's the highest rated quarterback. He's got the highest QBR in the league. He's top 10 in just about every conceivable category as a quarterback, yet he didn't make the top 10. Was that odd to you at all, or is it not enough of a track record? What do you chalk that up to?
Well, I would say I chalk it up to the fact that a lot of evaluators look at him as a system quarterback, the dreaded S word, right? Now, is that unfair? Probably. And they say he's a playmaker, and certainly he's been tremendous since he's been in the league, but it goes back to like end of a game, you need a guy to sort of make a play for you, carry your team, or have the sort of athleticism to do that. Mahomes, Allen, Stafford, a lot of those guys have that, where Purdy's not necessarily that quarterback. Not that he can't make plays. It's just, he's in a great system with a lot of playmakers around him, which does help him shine. Now, to his credit, he's played phenomenal. 17-4 as a starter, 4 playoff wins, best QBR in the league. But look at Dak Prescott. He had one of the best seasons last year, too, and he was number 10. So sometimes it does come down to like, hey, you're playing quarterback at a really high level, but if I'm on the kickball field picking best players, like we're in elementary school, you're going to kind of pick the guys that you feel like are just, those dudes that are transcendent talents. Like Justin Herbert. That's why he's always going to be high. Just that, Jim Harbaugh took the Chargers job for one reason and one reason only. It was Justin Herbert.
Jeremy, you've done, I believe, every position so far except for cornerbacks. You did running backs, defensive tackles, edge rushers, safeties, tight ends, interior linemen, tackles, quarterbacks, off-ball linebackers, receivers. The one position I think that is yet to come is cornerbacks, and I'm going to take an educated guess and say that we're going to see Devon Witherspoon somewhere inside the top 10, but he would be, if that is the case, he would be the only Seahawk on the top 10 list, which I think is interesting. When you compare that to San Francisco, which has 9 guys so far inside the top 10. I'm curious what you heard from evaluators that you spoke with about Witherspoon, and then a similar question about Tariq Woolen, I should say, if anybody had any interesting thoughts on Tariq Woolen and sort of where he fits into that cornerback mix.
Yeah, Seattle's in an interesting spot there because it's not like they don't have talent or are described as a team that's close to being pretty loaded up with some good talent. Like they drafted well post Russell Wilson, a lot of good pieces in place. They just don't have a lot of premier guys, top 10 type players. And so, yes, you were right about Devon Witherspoon. He will be in the top 10. He was on a lot of top 10 ballots. He didn't necessarily get a lot of top 5 votes, but he was on a lot of ballots, and so that got him in. I'm sure those will come. One scout called him the toughest corner in the league. Like, he's just incredibly physical, as you know. And then Tariq Woolen, he was I don't think he was an honorable mention, but he was very close. He was kind of in that 15 range somewhere. So got a lot of votes. Some knocks on his tackling and some of his coverage, but I think for the most part, he's considered a high-end cornerback.
Just looking at this team as a whole, Jeremy, what do you think a reasonable expectation is based on all of the unknown? I keep throwing that out there. I think a lot of people are looking at this team going, well, it's been Pete Carroll and his system philosophy for 14 years, and now it's a first-time head coach and a first-time OC and a first-time defensive coordinator. There's just so much unknown with what they're going to look like under this regime. Do you have any sense of what it may look like to you, expectation-wise?
Well, if I'm forecasting out, I would say the defense, just based on what Mike McDonald did in 2 years in Baltimore, the defense is going to be stout. And he's got a lot of pieces to play with. Like we talked about, they might not have those necessarily top 10 names, but they have a lot of athletic pieces to kind of move around. In Baltimore, McDonald had Kyle Hamilton at safety. He was sort of a do-it-all player. So I'm curious how he uses chess pieces like that to make it work. So I expect them to be very competitive and in the playoff mix just based on that and the fact that on offense what you're getting. Tyler Lockett can still play. DK Metcalf wasn't a big presence in my ratings this year compared to years past. I think some are not necessarily questioning him, but just, the route tree, the route running ability isn't as complete as some others on the list, I would say. So, but you still know that he's a force of nature that can take it 80 yards in any play. So running backs galore, some questions about the offensive line, but I think pound for pound is enough there where I expect them to be back in the mix of the playoffs and at least for a wild card. We know Geno Smith can play, and I was surprised he didn't get any votes. So it's an interesting team. It's kind of a exercise in how you can build a roster in different ways. They're not going for those big names that you have to pay $25 million a year to necessarily, They're going for value, draft picks, and then pick their spots with like a Leonard Williams or Draymond Jones or guys like that, depending on where they see fit. Defensive line's obviously important to them. They didn't spend on offensive line, so they kind of had to get some journeyman guys there in the middle. So that's an interesting tactic, but they must feel like, pound for pound, those guys can get it done for a cheaper contract. So it's an interesting proposition, but there's definitely enough talent there.